We are live, everyone, and welcome back to the Comics Cube. I am with Nathan Cayanan. Nathan, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired, but I think it's a good tired because it's because I'm got a lot of fun stuff going on and things that I'm proud of and things that I'm excited for. So I'm glad to be, and that's especially why I'm glad to be here talking about it.
Nathan is a relatively new comic book writer, and when I say relatively new, I mean in like the last 5 years.
Hmm.
You've been writing for 5 years. You've been a professional comics writer for 5 years ish.
Yeah, correct. Well, yeah, so yes, I got into comics officially in 2020. I think
One.
it was 2022. Well, 2021 was when I was interviewed for the story is that I was accepted to the Milestone Initiative program through DC Comics.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone remembers that, but that was
I
a
do.
talent search. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
talent search that was announced in the I think it was called the DC Comics something dome. I forget what it is, DC Dome or whatever. Like it was a Comic Con for people in the pandemic, right? And they announced the initiative and they were just saying, "Hey, you apply for a slot
Fandom.
in it." Fandom, yeah, 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 that's right.
Yeah.
The fandom. And I applied just on a whim. I was kind of in mid-careers at that moment and I applied and somehow I got in and since then I've just been going hard at it as much as possible. I feel very privileged to do it. A lot of it's like a second chance in my career.
I remember the Milestone Initiative. I'll tell you why in a bit. But the
Yep.
first question I ask everyone who comes on my show is a very simple: why do you love comics?
Well, I mean, why do I love comics specifically? First of all, I love storytelling in
Mm-hmm.
general because and especially because I turned 41 recently and I'm starting to reflect on a lot of things. And
Yeah.
when I think about storytelling, it's the thing that helps me understand the complexities of the world and if things don't make sense to me if I can't, you know, see it in the framework of a story. And comics specifically resonate with me in that way because yeah, it's about storytelling, but it's in a specific way. And I'm a big visual guy. I actually wanted to be a comic book artist before anything else.
More than a comic
And
book writer.
what's that?
More than a comic book writer before
Yes.
any.
Well, it's the strangest thing. Well, because I remember I knew what I wanted to do when I was about like 8 when I got X-Men #1 drawn by Jim Lee.
Yeah.
And I just go like, oh my God, this artwork is incredible. And I remember just replicating it. I didn't follow through with that. I studied film instead when I went to college. It never escaped me. I always loved comics for that. It was part of my childhood. It was a part of my upbringing, and and that the energy that artwork brings to the story, both on the page or if we're talking about film, which I studied, on film, it makes it much more immersive in a way that feels extremely personal to me.
Do you remember when, like, so you mentioned X-Men #1 by Jim Lee.
Yeah.
Were you reading comics before then, or is that when you fell in love with comics?
Actually, no, it was before. The first issue that I ever read was Batman 416. And I know it's super, super specific reference. It's not even a popular issue. It's a issue where and this is why it resonated with me because I didn't understand. Like, at that age, about 8, 9 years old, you go like Batman and Robin are just characters in these costumes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I read it, and I guess at that time, Dick Grayson was no longer Robin; he was Nightwing, and there was a new Robin. And the artist at that time was drawing them fairly similarly. Like you couldn't distinguish them. I remember reading it, going like, "What the hell is going on here?" And it was an issue where Dick Grayson was sort of getting mad at Bruce Wayne
Yeah.
for, in a sense, abandoning him after he got shot by the Joker, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's why he became Nightwing. He felt like he was abandoned by Batman, my father left when I was 8, so when I read that, it resonated with me.
Totally.
Um, yeah, so and then that's why I think that's perhaps why it stuck with me for a long time and why I kept reading it and Batman is my favorite character. Like if you look, I wish I could show you. We're in the middle of a move right now. I usually have like a crazy display like of all of my Batman action figures. But it is for that reason. Like they're not just cool characters and costumes. They represent something much more deep that I like to explore. And that's why I even as an adult, as a 41 year old, I
Yeah.
still read them.
Was it also a factor back then? Because I remember the first time I saw specifically Nightwing too, actually, which was in an issue of New Teen Titans.
Hmm.
Um, when I realized he was the old Robin, I think
Hmm.
something clicked in my brain because before that, from the cartoons, all I thought was like, oh, these are the same characters from every single, in every single episode of every cartoon.
Yeah.
It was that Filmation Batman cartoon, where they jump into the Batmobile and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
the cape drapes over the Batmobile. But
Yeah. I
like,
think so. Yeah.
because I thought they were such static characters, when I saw Dick Grayson as Nightwing, I was like, wait, the comics are different. In the comics, things can change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
that was that a factor for you too?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like, I think that's the thing that's interesting about comics. People is nowadays, even still nowadays, which is strange, people think of comics as like this kiddie thing. But, if you really got into it, there's a lot of adult themes, and you start to realize, uh, it's like, you're graduating emotionally. Like, you realize, like, oh, these things that we expect to never change do change, and that could create some sort of identity crisis, I would think, right? Because you
Yeah.
go like, oh man, like these characters who are so famous, and everyone has accepted them as Batman and Robin, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson. They can change, they could abandon each other, they can, create their own identities outside of each other, and that can be both exhilarating but also scary from a perspective of a kid, I would think, anyways.
Yeah, you don't want to change it, but like it's a weird thing that with the
Yeah.
comics fans do, right? It's like, yeah, we want change and development, and then the moment something changes, we're like, the hell are you doing?
Yeah, yeah, it's still as adults, right? Yeah, like we so you look at the fan pages and people go like, "Oh, you can't make Spider-Man a different race." It's like, it's like we
Oh,
didn't
you
make
really
him a
can.
different race. Yeah, it's like it's just a different person, you know?
My favorite was when they killed Steve Rogers and then they made Bucky Captain America and the fandom went crazy. And
Yeah,
then like 3 years later, they were bringing Steve Rogers back, and then the fandom went crazy again because at that point they fell in love with Bucky as Cap.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, dudes, come on,
yeah.
can we?
Well, that's the thing about comics too, is that like, no change is permanent, like you feel like a death can feel, traumatic, but it's like, oh well, 5 years down the line, if they want, they could just bring them back. Like Jean Grey is a great example of that.
I was in the comic store here a few weeks after Amazing Spider-Man 700 came out when they
Uh-huh.
you know when they did the Spider-Man Dr. Octopus body
Yeah.
swap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And just a few weeks after, a dude, like I was just chilling, and then a dude came in, went to the counter, and asked for that issue. And then when he couldn't get it, he was like, "But I need to have it. It's the very very last appearance of Peter Parker." And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Really?"
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, even Superman, right? Like Superman, what, 75, where when he died, like
Yeah,
I remember everyone going like, "Oh my God, this is gonna be like a collector's." I was like, I think I have like three of them so,
but you
somewhere
were a
in my
child is
collection.
the difference.
That is true. That is well, no, we're grown adults also going like, because I remember my cousin, he's
Yeah,
5 years older than I was, and he thought he was like buying Apple practically, right? Like he was so like Apple stock. So I remember he bought it. He was like, putting it in the plastic and making sure it was like well maintained.
yeah,
And it's like now I find them in the dollar bin.
yeah. It's an early lesson in economics. If you all think you're buying something special,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
you're sabotaging yourself. But another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because you said that reading Batman 416, you had no idea what was going on, right?
Yep.
And I wanted to talk to you about that and comics today because I
Mhm.
feel like, and maybe even media today,
Mhm.
because I feel like a lot of the readership or the viewership today, they insist on starting at the beginning and being given all the information. Whereas back in the 80s, we were like, well, this is what we have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
you're either on board and catch up on back issues and then the next issues, or you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about starting a story from in the middle of the story in medias res?
Well, I mean, that's hard because this is actually why I don't read as much Marvel anymore. because I
Hmm.
remember I used to read X-Men, similar situation. Like I started reading X-Men right around X-Men #1, right? But that was still in the middle of the, of his existence, and you would read it and go like, "What the hell's going on?" Right? Like, why is this person there, and why are these people dating and whatnot? That's not what I remember from the cartoon, right? But but at some point in my upbringing, I stopped reading probably because I just couldn't afford it anymore. I just got distracted with
Yeah.
school. And I tried to get back into it in college. And it was, or I can't remember when this was, but I tried to read X-Men again and I got really confused. And I tried over and over and over again. There was a time where Brian Michael Bendis, who I love as a writer, it was when he wrote Uncanny X-Men, but then he also wrote, I forget what the title was, but it was like the X-Men from the past came to the present, and then simultaneously that iteration of the X-Men
Yeah, yeah, I remember
existed
this.
coexisted with the like the
Yeah,
current version, and I was like, wait, what's going on here? So it like took me like a while to figure that out, and eventually I did, but I remember they did a change again. I like stopped reading for like a year, and I went back into it. I was like, I don't know what's going on here. So I struggled with it. I mean, I can enjoy. I'm also one of those people that can also read something not because of the story or understanding the mythos or ethos or whatever you call it. Um, I can read something for the joy of the craft. Like I forget who the writer is. He's the guy who's writing he did the Wolverine Revenge, is it? He's with the Greg Capullo right now.
okay.
Starts with a B. Brian Hitch. Brian Hitch.
Oh, right.
Yeah, yeah, Brian Hitch. I didn't hear about him, or for some odd reason, I didn't really read anything of his. And he was right. He wrote X-Men, and I picked it up, and I didn't really understand what was going on. But I was like, oh my God, this is a brilliantly written thing. Like I'm confused, but that's okay. Like I like the way he's doing it. I studied it, and
Yeah.
it got me hooked on. It made me want to figure out what was going on. Like I went on Wikipedia and I looked up the wiki fandom pages, and it's still a lot, but it does. Um, I so the short answer to your question is like I guess it's fine. I guess depending on what value you get out of it, and for me, because I look at it from both a story, uh, a world perspective as well as a craft perspective. Like I can switch from one to the other pretty easily.
I know you listed Alan Moore as one of your key influences.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I think in his BBC masterclass, he says something like a plot is the least of the thing.
yeah,
It's really just a structure to get you from point A to point B, but then
yeah,
there's everything else about writing.
yeah,
Uh, and I do think that a lot of readers, when they try to criticize something, they go straight to like, oh, what's the plot?
yeah,
But sometimes that's not the point, right?
yeah. No, I
Unless
agree.
it's like a mystery.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, like, you think about like anime or manga, right? Slice of life stuff. I love watching those things, especially if they're funny, right?
Yeah.
But you think about if you break it down by plot, you're like, well, the plot is actually really boring, right? It's like, like I know this
Slam dunk.
right. Well, yeah, I've not watched that. I've not watched that one.
It's all playing a basketball game.
Well, correct. Yeah, yeah. It's like, but then the experience is so immersive. Like Haikyuu, right? Haikyuu
Yeah.
is a great example. It's like, oh, they're just trying to win the volleyball game, right? But the experience and the details and and then you compound that with the art, which if it's really good, like really dynamic, especially with Haikyuu, it's very energetic and the perspectives are incredible and you look it feels like you're watching animals soar through the sky. It just makes the experience itself great, and you don't even think about plot. At least I
Yeah.
don't for that thing.
With the exception of Jim Lee and Alan Moore, who I
Mhm.
think go on a lot of people's lists. Who else are your comic book influences, both in art and in writing?
Well, so in writing, if we're talking about comics specifically, and I kind of gush at bringing him up, but Tom King is my biggest influence in the last like five. He's been at it for a while, I think, like right, like almost 10 years, or at least I've been reading him for almost 10 years. And Tom King was actually my mentor for the Milestone Initiative program. So, And I remember when they told me he was my mentor, I was like, I had like an existential crisis. I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And it's because when I read, the stuff I like to write are about characters who really struggle with themselves. It could be guilt, it could be, you know, trauma that they're dealing with.
Hmm.
And Tom King stuff definitely goes into a lot of that in some of the most artistic ways. I remember reading Mr. Miracle, the first issue, and I went like, What the hell is this? What is this?" Have you read that book, by the way? Have you read Mr. Miracle?
His Mr. Miracle, no, but I've heard very good things about it.
Yeah, and he gets kind of meta, Tom,
Yeah.
and that's right up my alley too. Um,
I
I'm
read his
also
Supergirl recently, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Like I was surprised how much I like that. I mean, what do you think of the ending, by the way? Like, did you
I could have done without the ending.
Okay, gotcha.
But up until the ending, I thought it was an amazing book. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? I don't want to
yeah,
spoil it for anyone.
yeah. I'll say this. I
And the
like
fact
the
that you asked me that question makes me think you know it was a controversial decision.
well, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, we'll stop there, I guess. But I
Yeah.
enjoyed it, but I kind of like that sort of thing that he
Yeah.
does with his endings. Um, it's,
I think if the time jump hadn't been as big, I would have been more into it.
mm, yeah, yeah, okay, I get that. I get that. Yeah. I also am a fan of Scott Snyder. He's actually the one that got me back into reading comics with his Batman run.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah.
when I because I had not read I went to film school and I pretty much spent my time watching movies and I got back into comics and I subs they did when we still they still had subscriptions. I subscribed to Batman 1 and I remember going like, "Oh my God, this is what comics are like now? This is
Yeah.
crazy." And I could not stop reading, and that's practically why I'm still in it now. But if we're talking about some of my biggest influences in my writing in general, because I write a lot of prose too. There's Juno Diaz. I'm not sure if you know him, but he has an interesting book. I believe it's The Wonderful or Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, something like that. And that's also comic book related, strangely enough. You should check it out if you're interested in reading a
Yeah.
prose book. Um, yeah, yeah.
What what about like because in comics, storytelling is more than the writing, right? It's the pacing and
Yeah.
blocking and stuff. So like what about art wise?
Oh, like my favorite artist? I mean Jim Lee, of course. J. Scott Campbell. I like how fun his work comes out. Alex Ross. But like now that I'm in the industry, I have a lot of friends who are doing it themselves, and I get to see their processes, and I actually ask them because I'm the book that we're practically here for. I drew myself, and I get a lot of tips from
Yeah.
my friends. Like Greg Maldonado was an artist I partnered with for the initiative. V. Ken Marion, who helped me do that book right there, or my short story in that book right there. Actually, his page is right there. I bought his page of our story together at New York Comic Con. He's a fantastic artist on Green Lantern right now. Um, but yeah, if we're going back to the originals, let me see here. I forget her name. Um, oh my God. Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember her
Okay.
name. She
All
did
right.
Catwoman. She did Catwoman though. I remember her. Joelle
Joel Jones.
Jones. Yes, yes.
Oh,
Oh,
amazing.
yes, correct.
Amazing. And oh man, the Bilkis Evely, who was Tom King's
Yes.
artist on Supergirl. Oh,
Yeah.
she's
I
amazing.
I think every time I look at it, it's amazing because you can tell how detailed, like, because she does her lines, I'm looking at it and I'm just like, I can feel her fingers, drawing those
Yeah.
lines and like, it just feels so detailed. I think that's why her artwork is so amazing.
And since you also draw, of course, you appreciate that stuff a lot more.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
I do. I mean, I do digital. I would prefer to do more traditional because I mean, I have my drawing desk. I have the tools for it. But given that I just don't have the time, because I do teach and I do all these other things to pay my bills, I regrettably have to go digital. But if I had all the time in the world, I would I would go with the pen and paper and try to match some of my most admired artists.
Yeah, but that undo button is unparalleled.
Yes, yeah, I do that. Like I'm drawing like on my sketchbook even. I'll go like, oh, I messed up, and I'll be like, oh
Oh,
shoot, I
damn it.
can't do that. Yeah, I can't go back. I gotta get an eraser.
As mentioned, you got your start with a milestone initiative, and I'll tell you why I remember it. It's because
Mhm.
I started this podcast in 2020, and
Ah,
one of the first interviews I ever did was with a great Dennis Cowan.
oh man, and he's awesome. He's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah,
He's got like such a presence too. Like when I was interviewing him, I was like, oh man, he's so cool.
yeah, he is cool. He is very cool. When he we did the initiative and we went to Burbank for the summit, they show. I don't know if did he show you I think it was what was the liquor? Not vodka, but like his alcohol ad. Did he show you that?
No, he didn't. He
Yeah, no,
didn't.
look it up. It's fun. We laughed really hard because it was like he literally modeled for this alcohol brand, and it was like he was just like sitting there like all like cool and stuff. We're like, man, this he is the coolest guy in comics, even still today. Like he like
Yeah.
everyone wants to talk to him.
Yeah, I felt like I was talking to like a rock star or something.
Yeah, and he
But
acts like it too. He knows it. Yeah.
but what was that like working with a milestone initiative and coming up with those stories? I know you wrote an Icon and Rocket story.
Mhm.
Um and yeah, so what was that process like being mentored by Tom King, and who else like helped you out throughout?
Well, I to answer that question, I think the context would matter. I actually got my master's in creative writing um, in 2012 or 2013, and my intent was always to try to develop a writing career while I was teaching, but I never did it because I was scared, pretty much. Like it was just something, and I had the teaching that was sort of secure for a guy my age because I was adjuncting pretty much the entire time. And I never pursued writing because I just knew it was hard, and it was a lot of my colleagues they tried and they got some progress, but at some point they just stalled, so I just didn't do it. And then the pandemic came in, and everything shut down, and teaching became extremely difficult. Like I was going through something existential at that point because I was not I'd been teaching in the college level for about think 5 years at that point, and I wasn't getting closer to full time, and I I felt as if I was failing in that way, even though I was doing quite well as a teacher. There's just systemic things that just made it hard to make that the primary way of living. And at that point, 2020 to 2022, I went back to school. I was getting my MBA. And I remember so we were on Zoom for class, and I remember like zoning out on school, and I watched the DC Fandom
Yeah.
the video while I was supposed to be in class. I kept, like I was just, and they talked about the Milestone Initiative at that time, and I was like, oh, I'll apply to that. Let's see, I should really give it a shot. But simultaneously, I was like, I don't feel good about my trajectory. Like this is not a bad situation, but it doesn't feel very fulfilling. And so when I got in and they accepted me and they did the interview and everything, like the whole year felt very surreal. And I remember when they accepted me, I went to Aldi. I don't know if you know what Aldi is, but Aldi is a grocery store. Like right after my interview, after they told me, I went to the grocery store and I went to the bread aisle because I was supposed to get bread, and I stared at the bread for a good 10 minutes because I was just like, what the hell is happening right now? And I remember people passing by going like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? And then and then they told me, no, you have mentors and you have mentor Tom King. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy because he's like the guy that I'm following right now. Metaphorically, not literally. And it felt like, very rarely, and I think this applies to everybody, like very rarely does it feel like the stars align for us. But it felt very much like that. Even if it was just for a year, because once you get into comics, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of people who are in the industry and how much of a struggle it is, even if they make get a lot of progress. At some point, it becomes a struggle, you know.
Yeah.
But that was a year where I was like, this is amazing. This is an experience that I will always value. I don't know what it's going to be like after this year and after this, this program's over, but it instilled in me a passion to pursue something that I always that I was passionate about, but also afraid to because it had no built-in security. But I said, you know what? If the stars aligned in this way, I think I should at least give it a shot. Even if I fail in the aggregate, at least I had a good reason to give it a shot. So that's pretty much how it felt. And that's how it feels now still too.
And the truth is, just the fact that you got that shot is already so much more than what a lot of aspiring people have.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't forget that. And the more I do it, I go to the cons and I go to the tables and I meet these guys who are doing, the indie scene and they're extremely talented and they've been doing it for like 10, sometimes 20 years. And I go, what, they haven't gotten that opportunity like I got. And so that is something that I never take it for granted. I always remember that this is a privilege. And I'm constantly grateful. And I also constantly remind myself like you can't go alone too. You have to, if there's an opportunity to point to somebody else so they can get an opportunity, then I'll do it. So there are 24 of us in the initiative. And every time I get a project or if I get a lead, I will go, how could I get them to get a position? Or a guy, there's a guy, Jordan Hart. He did a book called I'm looking at it right now, actually, Ripple Effects, and it was a great book. And I just remember we had the opportunity. We were at a picnic, and we were I was sitting next to someone from DC, like someone from the talent develop or the talent department, and I said, "Hey, you know, meet this guy, Jordan Hart." He didn't ask me to introduce him, but
Yeah.
he's like a really good guy. Because again, as you mentioned, like there are people who are talented who don't get that. And I think it's important. I mean, you can't do it for everybody, but at least you try to do it for as many as you can.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes somebody's a better fit than you, and sometimes you're a better fit than them. And
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the part where I tell our viewers that Nathan, you are Filipino.
I am. Oh, there's a light flare. It's like a Steven Spielberg movie. Um,
Were
oh,
you born in America?
I was born in America. Yes, I was born in you're gonna have to look at the other part of my house here. I was born in America. I was born in El Monte, California, which is in the San Gabriel Valley. Um, yeah, 41 years here.
Yeah.
Well, theoretically, like a few years in Asia, because I taught and lived in Asia for a little bit, but pretty much California boy.
California. Okay.
Yeah.
So, given that you are Filipino American, what was the because I noticed that in your milestone initiative story with Icon and Rocket, you said it in Cambodia.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what's the decision for that, given how easy it would have been for you to just set it in the Philippines?
Well, so it actually wasn't easy because like, I was really trying to figure out because I knew I wanted to do a well, actually, hold on. Let me think about this. Can I answer this? Because they also told me that there are certain things that I can't talk about. I think I can. Um, what I will say is that when I wanted to write a story, when they told us to write it, they told us that we had these characters available, and at that time they didn't have any Asian American characters or Asian characters that I could use.
Mhm.
Um, so I said like I'm gonna set it in Asia. That's how I'm gonna pop in the Asian angle in there. And when I was learning more about the milestone characters, about Icon and all that, I was thinking like, how am I gonna make this work? And I realized that, Icon, the reason he gravitated toward me was two things. Like he's a Republican, and I'm a fairly left or left of center person. But he's a Republican character, so that fascinated me. And then the second thing was he is like 100 something years old. And I thought, oh, I could, use that somehow. And this is act and let me tell you how I actually decided to use Cambodia. there's a have you ever heard of the documentary Donut Man or Donut King?
No, but
Yeah, it's yeah, it's about this Cambodian American who uh pretty much opened up a bunch of donut shops here and created his own little legacy after he escaped the Cambodian War.
that's
Uh
interesting.
yeah, and I remember because I remember I was actually I pitched a few things and I was trying to figure out like, well, and I did think about like how am I going to integrate the Philippines in there, and I just couldn't figure it out naturally because I also didn't want to just set in the Philippines because I'm Filipino, you know?
Yeah, I get that. I
So,
get that.
yeah, at least at that point, I just didn't have an authentic angle to go for. But then I remember seeing that documentary and went, oh, if I could write it where Icon represents the American, the Nixon perspective of things, where yeah, and the perspective of the Vietnam and Cambodian War, and he's bought into it, but then he realizes as he's there that this war is wrong in a variety of ways, and he kind of wises up in the middle of the story and does the right thing. Um, so that's the reason that I wrote a Cambodian story. Um, yeah,
No, yeah, I completely get that. It's
yeah,
like, not writing related, but let's say I didn't know you or you didn't
yeah,
know me, and I
yeah,
saw you at a convention and I knew you were Filipino.
yeah.
I think I would wait for another Filipino to approach you first
Oh yeah.
because yeah, because I wouldn't want to be like, well, he's just gonna think I'm approaching him because I'm also Filipino.
yeah. Well, I'm very used to it though. I'm very used to it. Actually this semester, um, I'm teaching college, and for some reason, a bunch of the Filipino students I'll like introduce myself, I'll do my little spiel about the semester and all that, and then one of the students said like, "Are you Filipino?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "Cool." And I was like, "Okay, cool. You better do well."
Do you think Filipino Americans over time in like the last 41 years have become like more proud of being Filipino?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so. Well, the thing is, I feel like there's always been some level of Filipino, at least American pride.
Yeah.
Um, and I know about the debate because and especially since I used to teach ESL students,
Mhm.
the first generation versus second generation perspective is a very interesting one, right? So I know there's a difference between, Filipino pride and Filipino
English.
American pride. What can you
Yeah.
say that? What's that?
Speak only in English. Yeah,
Yeah,
that kind of yeah.
yeah, that sort of thing, right? And I get that, that sort of nuance there, right? Like, and I do, at least from an outsider's perspective, from a Filipino American perspective, I do feel that Filipinos, and I think rightfully so, for a variety of reasons, because even though I haven't been back to the Philippines in a while, like I can tell that there's been a lot of advancements since I was last there,
Yeah.
in a variety of ways, and I feel like whatever increase in pride that I see from an outsider's perspective, I think is well earned. I feel that Filipino Americans have always had a sense of pride, but I think part of that is because there is that whole like, we are together outsiders sort of perspective.
Mhm.
And you could tell when we have our Filipino American events, it feels like you can be perfect strangers, but you're like best friends, like right upon meeting, and it's
Yeah.
because there's this assumption or this feeling like we've had some overlapping experiences and perspectives.
If anyone in the live stream has any questions for Nathan about growing up in the U.S., right, transitioning to writing, the Milestone Initiative, now is the time to do it. Write it down. I'll get back to it eventually because now we're talking about your new release, which is being released this weekend.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow, it's being
Yeah,
released tomorrow. Called Suspicious Activity, being
yeah.
released by Hot Tropics Press,
Hmm.
which was my last interview for the Comics Cube. Actually, was
Yeah.
Angela Mendes for Hot Tropics.
Yep.
Um, Tell us what Suspicious Activity is about.
Well, suspicious activity, the simple pitch is that it's about Asian American gangsters in the San Gabriel Valley. It's a story that I've actually been writing for the last 10 years. But if we go deeper into it, it's actually a bit more than just Asian American gangsters. It's about trauma. It's about a sort of existential, our place in the world, the guilt we feel, And it does, and the book does it in a fairly, I'll just say this, it's a weird book, but it's purposely weird. I wrote it in such a way where it's supposed to confront these almost philosophical ideas. But it does so through the straightforward story is it's about a Asian American accountant for the Asian American mafia, and specifically for a gang called the East Side Kin, which is run by a Filipino American named Marvin Andrada, and he pretty much has his own empire in the San Gabriel Valley, uh, and it's rooted in the gangs that came to power or pretty much came to fruition in the 1990s. So I imagine what it's like if those gangs, such as the Asian Boys or the uh, shoot, like the Little Rascals and all that, they if they pretty much survived and became a mafia-esque sort of entity. And I plan to explore that world that's inspired by that history through 3 volumes. So this is volume one. I already know what's going to happen in volumes two and three. I'm really excited about all of them.
Were you always interested in the history of gangs in the area of
Well,
specifically Asian American gangs?
well, Asian American gangs later only because I feel like Asian Americans or maybe Filipino Americans, I don't know, but at least the Filipino Americans I grew up around, obsessed with gang culture, Godfather, Goodfellas, all
Mm.
that, right? And they always wanted to like, see their own families as like, a sort of mafia, right? He was like, oh, if you have to get something done, you have to ask these people, or you have to follow this sort of process, even though it's just like a regular family, right? Again, at least that was my experience. So because of that fascination, I kind of wonders like, well, I would like to write a gangster story, and but I should probably write an Asian American one, and that started the interest in that. And then once I started researching them and realizing like, oh, they're much different than Italian mafia gangs, right? And understandably so. All gangs of different subcultures are very different in a variety of ways. But I started researching them and I started learning about, the ones in California, and I just became like hooked on it. I like it's funny. I went as deep as to find message boards on Reddit that these Asian American gangsters would go on and they would just clown on each other and just like they'll like put a picture up of like a picture of something in like Inglewood, and it's like, oh look, the Asian boys Inglewood branch or whatever they call it, look what they're doing, and they just like clown on each other on a Reddit board. And I just thought it was hilarious. Like it's an interesting subculture.
In on a public forum?
Oh
Really?
yeah, yeah. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised what's out there. I mean, like a lot of the people who do, say stuff on those boards are they're kind of retired typically. Like there were
Huh?
people who were part of the gangs when they were like in high school or in early college, but they're not in it anymore, but they're aware of what's going on and they kind of keep up with it. I mean, even and the thing that's funny too is every time I go to a Filipino American event, which is there's a lot this month because it's
Mhm.
American.
October, yeah.
Yeah, correct. It's October, Filipino American History Month. I'll go to one and then I'll meet a new guy usually. So Angelo, his friends usually, they'll all a lot of them will go, oh yeah, man, I was in that. Like I was in the, I was one of those gangs, and it's just funny. It's funny to me. Like it's I was never in one myself, um, but I had family members who were involved in different degrees. I had friends who were in them, and it's fascinating to see how it's touched a lot of different people I've known in different ways throughout my life.
Did you interview them for the book?
No, I didn't think I needed to because it was like and also I'm kind of a chicken when it comes to that. But I wanted to I didn't really need to because as I mentioned, it's yeah, it's a gangster genre book, but if and when you read it, it's how do I describe it? It's more than about that. And
Yeah.
in terms of trying to, like I would do if I did the interview, would try to get some authenticity to it. But I felt like I had enough research. I did a lot. Um, And at least enough to develop this world. And also, and I guess theoretically, I did do interviews with different people who were involved in it. Because then I would tell a guy, what I'm working on, and sometimes they'll like go on a whole like pull me in and just tell me a whole story about, the old days and whatnot. And not just Filipino Americans, just like because I used to go to church a long time ago, and you'd be surprised how many
Uh,
people go to church and they're like ex-gang members, and that's why they're actually at church. And they would just tell you their whole history, why they did it. And that's what this book is about too. It's not a book that's about, how cool it is to be a gangster or how cool the violence is or whatever. It's like, why would somebody want to do that? And it's because the my theory is that the most noble thing a person can do or that everyone can do is to survive in a system that is often rigged against you. And especially when we think of gang members, typically they're people who were born into circumstances that, kind of force them to do it.
yeah.
And there are people who want to be gangsters because they're just a bunch of jerks and they just want to, you know, um, uh, rule over people, right? And they want that power. But most people that I've met, the ones who are no longer gangsters anymore, but look back at it nostalgically, they say they did it because there was just no other way. It was like this is just their destiny, and it was just a phase in their life or something they may still even be doing because they're just
You
they
just
just
have to.
didn't have any other options. And that's
Yeah.
noble. And that's somehow noble, and it's understandably so.
Without spoiling anything, how would you say, like, what are the key differences you would say between Asian American gangs and, the ones we see more often with the Italian mafia?
Uh, hmm. I mean, the structures are a bit looser, I would think. Because with the mafias, they're it's almost like the Vatican. It's like so structured. Whereas with the Asian American gangs, they're a bit looser in certain ways, but they're still trying to develop some level of hierarchy and structure. But it's not as official. But in my book, I kind of try to make it that way. In fact, in my research, I learned that there were some attempts at that. Um, I don't want to point out the names I learned about, but there was a guy, he's in jail right now. And also it's like this is supposed because like according to him, it's like I have this, it's supposedly true. It's not even they're not even because he's trying to get out of jail. But he was like a big a Chinese gangster, a Chinese American gangster in San Francisco, Chinatown, I think it was. And he got powerful enough that he had an attempt to create a sort of internet not international like an American structure of gangs where like the Taiwanese gangs and the Vietnamese gangs they all had some sort of treaty or some sort of bonding thing so that they weren't competing against each other. I thought that was fascinating. I don't know if it came to fruition. I would assume that confirmation of that would be hard to come by, but I thought that was a fascinating detail that I learned.
Yeah, I'd imagine too, like Filipino gangs probably because we're so big on debts of gratitude,
Mhm. Yeah.
so like if you do us a good turn, we'll be with you forever.
Well, yeah, actually, that's a good point because I do feel like Filipino American gangs would be more like the Italian mafia gangs, whereas with like the with the other gangs they're like more like triads and whatnot. I don't really explore the Yakuza in my book. Um,
It's a
uh,
well-trodden path. That's fine.
yeah, correct, correct.
Um, yeah. So before I ask my next question, well, I guess my next question is, how do people buy your book? The book, by the way, everyone, is called Suspicious Activity. In case you missed it, how do people buy this book?
Well, actually, so it's supposed to have come out tomorrow. It's supposed to come out tomorrow, but it's technically on sale now. So if you go to hottropics.com, I think it is, you're able to
Yeah.
buy it now. Angela literally has the books ready to ship. We will have copies though tomorrow at the Liwanag festival. I think I said that right. Hopefully I said that right. But we'll at the it's in Long Beach at the Michelle Obama Library. I
It means
will
bright.
have say that again.
It means bright.
Oh, is that yeah, correct. Yeah, I believe Angelo told me that. See, I feel like a horrible Filipino, by the way. I really should work on that. But
Dude, it all scales down, right? It all scales down because now, like, I live in Manila.
uh,
My parents are from different provinces, and I don't speak languages of those provinces.
oh,
So I'm
really?
like, you know what I mean? Like, it all scales down. So
Apparently, from what I understand, I used to speak a little bit and understand really well Tagalog but I guess once I hit 8 years old, and my mom remarried at some point, like at 12 years old, I believe it was like it just kind of drifted
yeah,
away. But I will.
language isn't like riding a bike. You do have to practice it. Yeah,
Right, right. And especially since a lot of Filipinos speak English,
yeah,
like I've
that
been
too.
able to get around it. But I probably should at least know a bit more. But anyways, I I will have books also. I do have different festivals that I'll be at in the next few months. But for sure, if for everyone who's listening, if you're not going to be at any of the places Hot Tropics or I are going to be at, you could definitely go online at hottropics.com and order the book.
You mentioned earlier that a part of this was about Asian American identity, the guilt that you feel. Can you explain more about that guilt?
Well, so the guilt that I write about is not an Asian American thing per se. This book is actually extremely personal because it's it because when it comes to Asian American, I'll tell you this. This is gets where it gets complex. And if you guys read the introduction of the book, you kind of see where I'm getting at. I get a little what's the word? Conflicted when it comes to the way we talk about Asian American identity in Asia in America. Because strangely enough, the discussion is supposed to promote diversity, but it feels oftentimes that our narratives in this discussion feels flattened, right? So we always talk about it almost feels like the Asian American experience is the same for everybody. And that's kind of
Yeah.
why I wanted to write a gangster book because it's like, oh, not all Asian Americans are gangsters. This is going to be a different thing. And for me, my Asian American experience was very different from a lot of people even I knew. Like I wasn't somebody who was pressured to go to the top school. I actually was, I was not, I wasn't forced to play piano or play a sport or whatnot.
You weren't forced to become a doctor.
No, no, I wish I had actually make more money right now. But and I think there's a lot of people like that, and they go like my experience because it doesn't align with this Asian American experience. Does that make me less Asian American? And in the introduction of my book, I kind of go into that concept of how even in the academic sphere, we flatten that narrative. We go like every time we have to talk about the Asian American experience in history, we always have to talk about the Chinese Exclusion Act, or we always have to talk about, Manzanar and the Japanese internment, which are all important things, but I feel like it's become almost like a checklist and rather than an actual exploration of the human experience in this regard. And this is kind of what my book is trying to say in the beginning. I say like, hey man, so this is like I literally say this may be an ethnic book, but it's not going to be one where we're going to talk about trauma from intergenerational trauma or whatever. And the irony is that I kind of do still, but it's just that it's not as a checklist thing. It's something that just
Yeah.
comes out more organically. And to your question about the guilt that you feel like, from a personal level, I feel a lot of that just in terms of the fact that, I have a very complicated upbringing. And, as we talked about earlier, I feel lucky despite all of the complications of my upbringing. I'm here. I teach at a college, which is a fairly respectable position to have.
You're a
Uh,
mentee of Tom King.
I have a mentee of Tom, which is crazy. I still like get crazy, I freak out about that. I get to write for DC Comics here and there. I have a book coming out. This is a dream that I was afraid, despite being afraid for a majority of my adulthood, I got the chance to do it. And that leads to a level of, but I always go back to that boy who had his troubled upbringing. And, and you don't escape that. And I explore that concept and that theme through the lens of a fictional Asian American gangster who runs or who does the books for a Filipino American mafia guy, Asian mafia guy.
how much of the book would you say is in fact you?
Uh,
Like,
well, the thing that's funny is I think when I was writing it, I did not intend it at all.
mhm.
And then I realized like, oh shoot, yeah, this guy's kind of like me in a lot of ways in terms of his perspective. And people, myself included, but people in general too, we change a lot our perspectives, right? Like one day we could be very cynical, one day we could be very optimistic. And the character, his name is Bingo Andrada Wu, and he has a very cynic in the book. He has a very cynical view of the world, and it's because and you'll if you read it, you'll see why. He had a very traumatic experience as a kid tied to his gangster history, but he develops a cynical view of the world, which is and the phrase I use is there are no bootstraps that you can pull to get out of your destiny, right?
Good
You
one.
can work. Yeah, yeah, I was very proud of it. Uh, uh, and I feel that way sometimes. And I felt like that in 2022 or 2021 when I was like getting my MBA. I was like, I guess I'm just gonna fail at this thing, even though I worked really hard at this teaching and developing my teaching career. But sometimes I'm very optimistic, and sometimes I see, how lucky I am, and sometimes I am lucky, sometimes I'm unlucky. And I feel like those perspectives are reflected in this book. But is not. But if we're saying like how much of this guy is me, I am not an accountant for the Asian American mafia, and I am not. Uh, and I'll tell you this: he was shot in the face as a kid. I was not shot in the face as a kid, So
But did you kind of feel like you were shot in the face as a kid?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Philosophically and emotionally, I feel like the things that I feel were projected onto Bingo just in a different way. Um, and it informs his worldview and his choices throughout his life up until the timeline of the story.
You also draw this book, so you write and draw this book.
Mhm.
What was that adjustment like? Drawing for yourself.
Well, I mean, it's not the first thing I've drawn, luckily, I guess. So I've always drawn. As I mentioned, I wanted to be a comic artist since I
Mhm.
was 8, but I never dived into it. I just doodled here and there. But because of the initiative, I made friends with comic book artists like Greg Maldonado in New York. I talk to fairly regularly, and I'll send him some artwork, and he'll give me feedback and comments. And he teaches comic book art too, so he'll give me some tips, and I'll like learn from that. And and like because one of the main things that I struggled with was perspective, and I think that's actually a lot of people.
Yeah,
Like
it's a lot.
you could draw someone, I could draw someone just facing you straight forward, which anyone can do. But then when you're trying to draw a scene, you need perspective,
Yeah.
and that takes a lot of work. And I think it was definitely a large learning curve, but it was one that I was glad to be in, because it was something that I actually did for joy, something I enjoyed rather than, for work, which I have a lot.
What's harder, perspective or foreshortening?
What was the second thing?
Foreshortening.
What's that? Foreshorten?
It's perspective with a human body,
Oh,
like that. Like if it's
yeah,
something
yeah.
right at
That
you.
is, I mean, you're showing me your hand too. So hands are really hard. And so like you got perspective and hands. Yeah, I mean, just drawing people in perspective is just hard because they're not, like especially when you factor in the idea that every body type is different.
Yeah.
So, like what is that going to look like if, like what Batman's going to look like from up top is going to look very different than what um
Spider-Man.
Your King, yeah, Spider-Man or Kingpin will look like. So I struggle a lot. I have to do a lot of references. That's why I use my action figures for.
This is so. I guess my last question for this is that this is an interesting format that you've picked
Mhm.
because it's half comic and it's half prose. What
Mhm.
was the impetus for doing that?
Well, so when I started this, the gangster book actually was something I started in my master's program. That was in 2011. And ICE was at the time studying fiction. So that was prose writing. And the logic, by the way, was that I had gotten my film degree and I realized I was a bad writer. So I went back to school, got my master's in creative writing. And the logic for me was, you know what will make me a really good writer? I'm going to learn fiction. So I got a lot of practice doing prose from professors like Janet Fitch, who's an incredible writer, and Judith Freeman. I always want, and so I started writing this book. It was actually my thesis for my program. Um, but then as time went on, and I went back to it because it was like a lot of false starts. I thought like, oh, maybe I should do it as a comic. And then I thought like, but the stuff I wrote, the prose stuff was really good. Like I should use some of that still. And it's also a different experience too, because with comics, it's really hard to just stay in the scene and really like, if because if I put that much text in a picture,
Yeah.
you're gonna block all that image, right? And nowadays people don't want any text on the imagery, right? They'd rather just have the image speak for itself, rightful, understandably so. So I always kind of wanted, I always went vacillated between both formats. And actually Tom King, going back to my mentor, he actually had a book. His first book, or the book that actually got him noticed. It was what was it? Once Full Sky or something like that. I can't. I don't. I'm embarrassed that I don't remember the exact title. But it was comics and prose in there, and you can tell like Tom is a prose writer. Like he writes
Yeah.
beautiful prose. The Supergirl book is like the. I remember reading the part. I'll Should I just spoil it? Should I talk about
Okay. Yeah.
the dog when the dog got hurt? Do you
I
remember
mean,
that?
that's the first issue. It's fine.
Okay, good. Well, yeah, we're good then, right? Do you remember the prose there, like the writing, like the captions in there? I was like, oh my God, this is so beautifully written. And you know, so so I just always kind of admired that he attempted to do that. And it did, and it was, I would say it's fairly successful. It got him noticed. It was a thing that got him noticed by DC, and now his career is what it is.
Yeah.
But I always was like, I want to try that because it is like, the comics are a cool experience, but I really wanted to have that ability to like, grab the reader by the shoulders and go like, let me talk to you about this world and let me describe this to you because it's a much more intimate experience. And I feel like, and when you guys read it, um, I don't even just do prose. I chose a very specific way to execute it. It's weird, but it's not, it's deliberate, it's meta, but it's done in a way that yes, makes it very intimate, but it also coincides. It also is a creative choice that makes sense when you actually look at the story itself. And once you get to page 40, you understand why it's written like that. But then once you get to chapter 11 at the end, you understand exactly why it's like that.
What would you so you had specific chapters that you wanted to do as prose and specific chapters that you wanted to do as comics.
hmm Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so there's some like, yeah. So there are scenes where it's more, you know, action based. Definitely those were in comics. Um, but there are parts where I wanted to, um, like history, for example. I wasn't going to do comics for that. I was just going to explain the history or the background information. But I also wanted to have chapters where I explored the psychology of these characters. And that's pretty hard, at least from my perspective, and based on my skill set. It's hard to do that with comics specifically. Um, because like I wanted, if I want to tell you, um, there's a chapter, one of my favorite, strangely enough, my favorite character in the book is not even a gangster. a girl named Emily, who's like a struggling mother, single mother. And I write the scene, and when you read it, it goes and I describe the scene, yes, but then I stop and I go, there's a cue that makes me jump back in the past for a
Mhm.
paragraph or two. And then once I finish my point there, then I'll come back, like, or I'll make a vague reference to something. And it's all part of the experience that only pros can really accomplish. And it's very difficult to accomplish at least as effectively with comics.
The different media have different strengths.
100%.
Nathan, my very, very last question for you is fill in the blank. If you like blank, you should read Suspicious Activity.
Oh, if you like having an existential crisis, read Suspicious Activity.
Not really what I was thinking.
We all like it. You try, don't deny it. We all, because if we didn't like it, why would we have it all the time?
How about if you like piece of fiction?
Okay, let's say if you like, let's see here. If you like seeing seeing the world in a way you didn't before, read
Yeah.
Suspicious Activity. How's that?
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Nathan. Congratulations. Everyone, you can buy the book through hottropics.com. That is tropics with a K. And if you are in the area, go see Nathan at the Luanic Festival. Thanks, Nathan. This
Thank
was
you so
great.
much.
Stream is done.
All right, cool.
Thanks
Really
so